State Attorney General Jeff Landry is here. Congressman Mike Johnson is here in studio both. You guys had one great big event last night at BIPC. Tell us about that. Tell us how it went. Tell us what you guys talked about.
Oh, it was great. I mean, we actually had two events. We had one in Webster, one in Bossier. The one in Webster went before the one in Bossier. It was great events. And it was an educational event. You know, it was an opportunity for us to discuss with people the fact that your First Amendment does not leave you irrespective of the institution you're going to. So whether you're in a public square, in a public school, you have a First Amendment right.
Mike, what is the biggest, because I know that you have a long history as a constitutional attorney, what is the biggest misunderstanding, not only that parents and or students have about what their rights to prayer are and religious expression, but even more specifically, school administrators and teachers and people in charge?
There's a lot of confusion out there. And there have been some radical, what I call radical secularist organizations that for decades now have engaged in a campaign of fear and intimidation and misinformation. And they have really had some great success. They've confused a whole generation of Americans that they somehow have to surrender their First Amendment freedoms, their right to religious expression at the schoolhouse gate. But that's the exact opposite of what the law says. And what we did at the event last night was remind everybody the law is still on your side. Exercise your rights. You should do it.
Can a kid pray in class?
Of course, yeah.
Out loud before he takes a test?
Yeah.
Yes.
The rule of thumb is, and we put it in our publication, Jeff and I co-published this publication, Louisiana Student Rights Review. It's available at his website and at the website istandwithbossier.com. But yes, the answer is yes. Any student-led, student-initiated religious expression is totally constitutional.
But
the
it's
law
going to
never prevented
offend
that.
another student in the class, Mike.
Well, right, but as we
Come
explained last
on.
night, the price of free speech and living in a free country is that, oh my goodness, sometimes you have to be exposed to voices and viewpoints that you may not agree with, but that's the beauty of free speech.
Jeff, can the teacher lead the prayer?
Well, no, the teacher can't lead the prayer. That's the big no-no. And of course, that's why, look, it's great to have a partner like Mike. He really is. He helps, I tell people all the time, he kind of helps keep me in between the ditches, you know. Being from South Louisiana, it's hard for me to stay on the road.
Y'all are always on the ditches, yeah.
But, you know, that's why we put this manual together. It's exactly why we put it together, because it can't be initiated by the teachers. But it can be student-led, and that is the number one rule of thumb, is that if it's student-led, if it's student-participated, they can absolutely engage in it. And you got to remember, the First Amendment protects the minorities, right?
Sure.
Maybe someone who's offended by that, as much as it protects the majority to be able to get their point of view and their faith out as well.
Let me ask y'all this, because this bothers me to my core. At a graduation, a high school graduation, they always have a preacher up there and they pray. Is that safe? Is that still safe? Or extracurricular stuff, is that going to be safe?
The courts have ruled on graduation that if it's student-led, student-initiated, so if the valedictorian is chosen to speak at every graduation and the valedictorian gets up and says, you know what, I want to talk about the importance of my faith and how it's guided my academic success, perfectly constitutional. No one can stop them because it's their private speech. The difference is when the speech becomes the speech of the state, quote unquote. Now, student organizations, the other question, can you have a religious club on campus? Absolutely, and the Federal Equal Access Act and the Constitution protect the rights of all these religious organizations to have the exact same access as everybody else.
That is where the biggest misunderstanding is, especially by school administrators and school board members, et cetera, because you see at least a couple stories every month where school districts, out of, dare I say, ignorance, are squashing the freedom of expression
out of fear, and that's the whole problem, that we have a generation that has this sort of allergic knee-jerk reaction to all things religious, and oh my gosh, we got to run in and sanitize that out of the public square. Exactly the opposite of what the founders intended, and exactly opposite of what the law requires.
Intimidation is the number one, I would think, tactic used by, what is it, the number one that comes to mind is the Freedom from Religion Foundation.
Those are Mike's buddies.
Right, which is almost like an oxymoron of it itself in regards to the First Amendment.
Did you just call someone a moron?
I mean,
be careful.
That doesn't go over well here. Literally, if there is a cloud formation in the shape of a cross over a school, they call and threaten to sue.
No, that's right.
What advice? I know that I don't know what your relationship has been with Mr. Smith or Bossier through all of this.
I used to be one of their lawyers. I've defended them and other school districts around the country on this.
But what advice do you have for school districts who don't want to be intimidated by these bully tactics?
Well, we had the board members in Bossier and Webster stand up at both events yesterday for applause, to encourage them and to really congratulate them for their willingness to take a stand. They are doing that. They understand what the law is, and they're fighting tooth and nail to preserve students' rights to religious expression and all their other freedoms.
Because just because the Freedom from Religion Foundation or some other bluntly put, anti-religious group, just because they might call you doesn't mean necessarily the law's on their side.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Right. And
they
they win by default all the time, Robert, around the country. And that's why we need Christian board members and all Americans to understand what the Constitution provides, what the law is, and take that stand where they're able to. And the board is doing that in both of these parishes. We're grateful for it.
Go ahead, Mr. Jim.
And that's exactly why we put the manual together. The manual is designed not only for students. It says it's titled the Students' Rights Review, but it's important that principals, superintendents, board members, and parents read this manual as well, because it will give them a great understanding of the First Amendment rights that exist inside the schoolhouse.
The big problem I have, Mike and Jeff, is that these lawsuits cost a lot of money, and yet it's great to have school boards that will defend. But that's taking money right out of the class. Money that we could be spending in the classroom.
No, that's exactly right. And so what they have to do is be wise as serpents, gentle as doves, as Scripture would tell us, right? And so they have to stay within the legal guidelines. And when a line has been crossed, they have to acknowledge it and fix it, adopt the policies. Bossier and Webster in the process of revising their written policies that hadn't been updated in a few years, and they're going to do all that. That's going to moot the case. It should, and it should take it out of the taxpayers' concern, and it should get them safely within the lines. But at the same time, they're going to stand vigorously for the students' rights to religious expression, the right to have faith on campus. The Supreme Court says it can happen, and it needs to happen. That's what we're trying to do as well.
So what is next, not only for Bossier, but a lot of school districts and schools across the state? And I would think, based on last night, you made a lot of people feel better to know that the state attorney general's office is behind them.
Exactly. And that was something when I was campaigning 3 years ago, when I would go around the state, I'd talk to superintendents, talk to school board members and parents, and they wanted to know. And this was a project that Mike and I decided to work on together. Like I said, he's a great partner. And we're hoping that this pamphlet, this manual, actually becomes a cornerstone for a movement that allows people to understand their First Amendment rights. And that, guess what? You can live out your faith inside the public square and inside the public schoolhouse.
Let me ask you about this. A football game. I have a kid playing. I would like to hear a prayer over the intercom to pray for the boys that are playing. Is that allowed or not allowed?
If it's student-led. Look, I grew up in high school.
But you're using the public address system that's paid for by the school board.
But if it's student-led, it's certainly a First Amendment right.
Yeah,
Okay.
so the idea is you have welcoming remarks by a student chosen on the basis of neutral criteria. Let's say the student body president or some other selection, and they go to the microphone and they spontaneously say, "I'd like to lead us all in an opening prayer for the players in the game." And they do that. No one can stop them because that's their constitutional right. On the other hand, if the school district sets it up
And puts it in the program and all that.
then it becomes school speech, quote unquote, and that's a different
So y'all are
thing.
giving us a little secret on how to do it around the rules.
Well, we're following the law precisely, and that's
Okay.
exactly see, because it's Erin. There's so much confusion about it. That's why these events are so important. It was so well attended, and both parishes were so excited about that. That's why these materials are being distributed around the state. Every superintendent going everywhere, and today we're wearing these blue lines on our hands. You see this? Today is the day. All the students in Bossier and Webster are drawing a blue line on their hand to symbolize that they're going to take a stand. And they're going to stand for their rights. They're drawing a line, and that's the big symbolism today. I was at Benton High School just a few moments before I got here. Huge crowd. The FCA there's got a bunch of kids, and they're going around the school drawing lines. It's really a great exercise in free speech and the Constitution.
So what's next for you, and what's next for the Attorney General's office on this topic?
Well, one of the things I would encourage school boards and school board members and superintendents that want to understand exactly what type of policies they can put in place that safeguard students' rights to exercise their faith, they can contact our office. Mike and I will be more than happy to work with them to create policies that will help ward off some of these suits.
Is this a problem across the state, Jeff? I know Bossier's been kind of the epicenter, but do you have this going on in other parishes?
Look, I think it's a problem across the country. I believe there's been this great chilling effect, and people out there are just confused as to what exactly they couldn't do, and they've been intimidated.
Confused and intimidated.
Intimidated.
Right.
Absolutely. There's no doubt that there's been a tremendous amount of pressure from the left to intimidate people, to basically squash our faith in and around this country in the public square. But guess what? This is the way that you can know you're right, and you have an opportunity to exercise your right.
What if and let's take the other side, just for grins a minute. What if I'm a family that I'm an atheist? I don't want my child in a classroom where there's student-led prayer or any kind of prayer. What are my options for my child?
They can homeschool.
Well,
I mean, no, look, I mean, the fact of the matter is those parents cannot infringe upon the other students' rights to express their First Amendment, just like we can't infringe upon their right to become, to profess the fact that they're atheists, right?
We have this thing in the law called the heckler's veto. There's no such thing as a heckler's veto. The First Amendment does not give you a right not to be offended.
Let me put it more blunt. Hey, snowflake, sit down.
Well, basically, right.
Can I leave the classroom during the prayer? Can we make?
Of course, yeah. Everybody has an equal right. The Christian kid has the same right as the atheist kid, the Buddhist, the Jewish student, whatever. Everybody has the same right. We have to respect one another. We really highlighted that at these events yesterday. I spent a big portion of my talk talking about how we're going to stand for our freedom, but we do it in a respectful manner because we believe in the free marketplace of ideas, and conservatives and Christians are not about censoring and silencing other viewpoints because we don't have to. We want more free speech. We want more vigorous debate because we have enough confidence in the truth. And everybody needs to recognize that. We respect everyone in their right to believe or not to believe. That's part of the beauty of America.